The man in front of her was supposed to be dead. Maya knew that for a fact because 3 years ago, she stood in the rain, staring at his name carved into stone, whispering goodbye to a future that never came back. Yet here he was now, alive, smiling, holding a gun. The warehouse smelled of rust and seawater, and every breath scraped her lungs raw. Behind her, another man raised his weapon calmer, colder, far more dangerous. Dante Moretti, the king of a city that buried its sins deep and called it order. Choose, Dante said quietly, not a threat, a sentence. Him, he continued, or the truth. Maya's heart slammed against her ribs, because the truth was worse than death. The truth was that her name had been written into a book of blood long before she was old enough to understand what loyalty cost. 3 hours earlier, she had only been a woman abandoned at an airport gate. Now, New York was deciding whether she would survive it. Maya Ellis had never believed that a life could fracture because of 2 short lines of text. She believed in slow endings, in conversations that unraveled over time, in love that faded with warning signs and honest explanations. What she did not believe in was collapse sudden, absolute, merciless. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. The message arrived at 11:47 p.m., glowing on her phone like something alive, something cruelly patient. She read it once without understanding, a second time with disbelief tightening her chest. By the third time, the words had settled into her bones, cold and heavy, as if they had always been waiting there. It 15. Hummed softly behind her, an exhausted sound that matched the late-night airport. Fluorescent lights flattened color and emotion alike, turning the world into a pale imitation of itself. Travelers moved past her in quiet clusters, some rushing, some resigned, some half asleep. But no one noticed the woman standing still, wearing a black dress chosen for Paris mornings and candlelit nights that would never happen. Paris. The word had once tasted like promise. Ethan had said it there, casually at first, then with certainty, someday. I'll ask you properly. Somewhere beautiful. She had believed him because belief had been easy back then, because he had looked at her as if the future was already written and she was part of it. Maya pressed her palm against the cool glass wall of the terminal, steadying herself. She did not cry. Not yet. She had always been good at holding herself together when things broke unexpectedly, as if composure could buy time, as if calm could delay pain. But her phone buzzed again. Not with another message from Ethan, there would be no explanation. She knew that now, but with a boarding alert she had been waiting for only hours earlier. Paris was still calling her name. It simply no longer wanted her. 30 minutes later, Maya Ellis was no longer at Gate 15. She sat inside a private jet without markings, its interior quiet in a way that felt intentional rather than luxurious. The leather seat was warm, the cabin dim, the hum of the engines subdued, as if the plane itself understood discretion. Across from her sat a man she had never seen before, dressed in a dark suit that did not wrinkle or draw attention. Everything about him seemed designed to exist without apology. He did not ask her name. He did not ask why her hands trembled when she folded them in her lap, or why her eyes looked unfocused, as if they were still somewhere else. He did not offer sympathy, nor did he pretend she wasn't unraveling in front of him. He simply said, in a voice that carried neither urgency nor softness, "If you stay here, someone will look for you. If you leave with me, they won't arrive in time." The words slid under her skin before she could question them. Maya looked up sharply. What? The man met her gaze without flinching. His eyes were dark, steady, and entirely uncurious, as if he already knew the outcome of this conversation. You were not meant to be alone tonight, he continued. The airport was not the safest place for you. Maya laughed once, the sound brittle. You don't even know who I am. No, he agreed, but I know who is watching. That was when fear finally found its way in, not loud, not panicked, but precise, the kind that rearranged your instincts and whispered that something had already gone wrong long before you noticed it. She glanced around the cabin. 2 men stood near the rear, silent and alert, their attention subtly fixed on her, not threatening, not reassuring, simply present. She realized then that this flight was not an indulgence. It was an escape. What's your name, she asked. Dante Moretti. The name meant nothing to her in that moment. It did not echo, did not ring bells, did not come with stories or warnings attached. It was simply a name, offered without ceremony. But the way the men behind him straightened ever so slightly when he spoke, and the way the air itself seemed to settle around him, suggested that names carried different weight in different worlds. Boss? One of the men said quietly from behind him. The word landed harder than any explanation could have. Maya understood then, instinctively, that she had crossed an invisible line. That whatever world she had belonged to before flights booked months in advance, future plans penciled in with hope, it had closed behind her without asking permission. Dante Moretti did not belong to a world where people drifted accidentally. His presence was deliberate. So was his silence. The engines deepened. The door sealed. The jet began its slow, deliberate movement away from the terminal. Maya stared straight ahead, trying to breathe normally, trying to make sense of the fact that she had accepted an offer she did not fully understand, from a man who had not asked her to trust him only to choose. She wondered, fleetingly, whether Ethan would try to call again, whether regret would arrive late, as it often did. Then, just before the plane turned toward the runway, something caught her eye, through the small oval window, beneath the cold white lights of the tarmac. A man stood alone near the edge of the service road. He was dressed too neatly for an airport worker, his posture relaxed in a way that felt practiced. A phone rested against his ear. He was smiling. Maya's breath stopped. Even from a distance, even through glass and shadow, she recognized him, the shape of his shoulders, the tilt of his head, the expression she had once known intimately, back when that smile had meant warmth instead of warning. Ethan. He lowered the phone slowly, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. His gaze lifted, precise and unhurried, locking onto the window of the jet, onto her. The smile widened, not in surprise, but in satisfaction. It was the smile of a man who had not lost control. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly where she was going. The plane began to accelerate. Maya did not look away until the world outside blurred into streaks of light and darkness, until the ground fell away and New York rose to meet her future sharp, towering, unforgiving. Her heart hammered against her ribs, no longer from heartbreak alone, but from the dawning realization that Ethan's departure had not been an ending. It had been a setup, across from her. Dante Moretti closed his eyes briefly, as if confirming something he had already suspected. When he opened them again, there was no trace of surprise, only resolve. "Fasten your seatbelt," he said calmly. "Things are going to move quickly from here." Maya obeyed, her fingers tightening around the strap as the city swallowed the sky beneath them. She did not know where this flight would land, or what waited for her on the other side. She only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her life had not been broken by a message at Gate 15. It had been claimed. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. New York greeted them before dawn, not with light, but with intention. From the jet's window, the city looked awake in the way predators were awake, quiet, watchful, already calculating. Maya felt it the moment her feet touched the tarmac, a pressure in the air that had nothing to do with weather. This was not a place that welcomed strangers. It measured them. Dante moved first. He did not rush, did not scan the horizon theatrically. He simply walked, and the men around him adjusted their positions without being told, forming a loose perimeter that looked accidental to anyone who didn't know what to look for. Maya stayed close, not because he asked her to, but because her instincts insisted on it. The calm around him was not comforting. It was authoritative. The drive into the city passed in near silence. Buildings rose and fell like held breaths, streets folding into one another with practiced indifference. Maya watched reflections slide across the tinted glass faces, headlights, fragments of motion, and wondered which of them belonged to people who already knew her name. The thought sent a chill through her, sharp and unwelcome. "You're wondering how much of this is about you," Dante said without turning his head. Maya blinked. "I wasn't, you were," he interrupted gently. "It's reasonable." She hesitated, then nodded. "I keep thinking this is some misunderstanding. That if I had stayed at the airport, I'd be on a different flight by now, trying to pretend none of it happened. And instead," Dante said, "you're here." The car slowed as they approached a building that looked deliberately unremarkable. No sign, no doorman, just clean lines and windows that reflected the city rather than revealing anything inside. The vehicle disappeared into an underground entrance without pause. Inside, the air changed. Quieter, thicker. Maya felt it settle around her like a held secret. The elevator ride was short and smooth, depositing them onto a floor that smelled faintly of citrus and steel. It was elegant without being warm, controlled without being cold. A place designed for people who valued privacy over comfort. Dante gestured down the hall. "You'll be safe here. Safe from what Maya asked." He looked at her then, fully, as if deciding how much truth she could carry without breaking. From being found too quickly. The words stayed with her as she moved through the space he'd prepared: bedroom, sitting area, windows that looked out over the city without opening to it. It felt temporary, like a pause rather than a destination, like being held in place while the world rearranged itself. Rocco arrived not long after. He introduced himself with a nod rather than a smile, his presence filling the room without demanding attention. He spoke to Dante in low, efficient phrases, fragments of information that made Maya feel like a variable in an equation she couldn't see. When he finally glanced at her, it wasn't with suspicion, but assessment. "Miss Ellis," he said, "if you need anything, I'm close, sometimes closer than you'll notice." "I'll try not to trip over you," she replied, surprising herself. The corner of his mouth twitched. Approval, perhaps. When they were alone again, the quiet pressed in. Maya realized she had been bracing herself since the moment she saw Ethan on the tarmac, holding her breath as if the world might lunge at her if she exhaled too deeply. Now, with the door closed and the city held at a distance, the tension began to unravel. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. Dante had been standing near the window, looking out at the skyline as if it were an opponent. He didn't turn around. "There were other people at that airport," he said. "Other women with broken plans. That doesn't answer the question." "No," he agreed. He turned then, leaning back against the glass. "Because the answer isn't simple." Maya crossed her arms, grounding herself. "Try." Dante studied her for a long moment. "Because someone expected you to be predictable tonight," he said finally. "And you weren't." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Maya thought of Ethan's smile, of the way he had looked up at the jet as if watching a piece fall into place. She thought of the message, timed with surgical precision, an ending designed to push her exactly where someone wanted her. "You think this was planned," she said. "I think," Dante replied. "That nothing involving Ethan ever ends cleanly?" Her heart stuttered. "You know him. I know of him." Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, enough to know that he doesn't disappear unless it benefits him. Maya sank onto the edge of the sofa, the room suddenly feeling smaller. "He told me my father worked for your family." Dante did not react immediately. When he did, it was with stillness rather than shock. He would say that. "So it's true?" "Yes," Dante said. "And no." The answer frustrated her, but it also felt honest. "Then tell me what's true." Dante moved closer, stopping just short of invading her space. "What's true," he said, "is that your father's name exists in places it shouldn't. What's true is that Ethan knows how to use that. And what's true is that if you had stayed at gate 15, you would have been approached by someone far less polite than I am." Maya swallowed. "And what happens now?" Dante said. "We wait to see who makes the next move." As if summoned by the words, Maya's phone buzzed. The sound was sharp in the quiet room, an intrusion that sent adrenaline flaring through her veins. She looked down, expecting Ethan's name. Instead, the message came from an unknown number. "You always hated surprises." It read, "I hope New York changes your mind." Maya looked up at Dante, her pulse racing. He met her gaze, understanding passing between them without explanation. "He's closer than you think," she said. Dante nodded once. "And so am I." Outside, the city continued its restless motion, indifferent to the fact that a new game had begun and that Maya Ellis, whether she wanted it or not, was already at its center. Morning arrived in New York without gentleness. It crept in through the narrow gap between buildings, thin and metallic, carrying the sound of traffic and distant sirens that never fully faded. Maya had slept little. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's smile reflected in glass, precise and knowing, as if he were standing just outside whatever room she tried to hide in. Dante noticed immediately. He said nothing about the dark circles beneath her eyes, nothing about the way she startled when a door closed too loudly. Instead, he adjusted the day around her, shortening schedules, changing routes, eliminating unnecessary movement. His concern was quiet, expressed in logistics rather than words. "You're going out," Maya said, watching him slip on his jacket. "Yes, and I'm staying. For now." She didn't argue. Part of her understood that safety, in Dante's world, was an equation constantly being solved and rewritten. Another part resented how easily her life had become a variable. Still, when he paused near the door, she surprised them both by speaking again. "Will you tell me if something happens?" Dante turned. "I don't lie by omission." It was not reassurance, but it felt like a promise. He left with Rocco and two others, the space around him folding back into stillness the moment the door closed. Maya wandered the apartment, touching surfaces she didn't recognize herself needing to touch, as if anchoring her presence. The city beyond the windows looked unchanged, indifferent to the fact that it was being watched from the shadows. Her phone buzzed shortly after noon. Unknown number. Lunch is better when shared. The message read, neutral ground. Plenty of witnesses. You always liked places with windows. Maya stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. She did not need the name attached to know who it was from. Ethan had always enjoyed framing danger as courtesy, as if the illusion of choice softened the threat. She typed nothing. Instead, she forwarded the message to Dante. His response came seconds later. Do not reply. I'll handle it. The relief was immediate and unwelcome. Maya hated how quickly she had learned to lean on him. How natural it felt to let someone else draw the lines of her safety. It made her question her own strength, her own agency. By the time Dante returned in the late afternoon, she had already decided she would not be silent much longer. They met again in the sitting room, the space between them charged with unsaid things. Dante's expression was controlled, but his eyes were sharper than before, alert in a way that suggested pressure building beneath the surface. He wants to be seen, Dante said, answering the question she hadn't asked. He wants you to know he's still in the city. He wants me to choose. Maya replied. Yes. She folded her hands together. Then I want to see him. The room seemed to hold its breath. Dante studied her, measuring not her fear, but her resolve. That's not a request I can approve lightly. I'm not asking for approval, she said quietly. I'm asking you to stop pretending this will go away if we wait. Dante's jaw tightened. You think this ends faster by giving him access to you? I think, Maya said, meeting his gaze, that he already has access. I just don't know how deep yet. Silence stretched between them, taut but unbroken. Finally, Dante exhaled, the sound controlled but heavy. 1 hour, he said. Public place, my terms. Maya nodded. It was enough. The restaurant was glass and light, perched above the street like a deliberate contradiction. Too open for violence, too exposed for secrets. Maya arrived first, seated near the window as Ethan had predicted. She felt Dante's presence, even though he was nowhere in sight. An invisible perimeter she trusted without fully understanding why. Ethan arrived precisely on time. He looked unchanged, still impeccably dressed, still moving through space as if it belonged to him. His smile when he saw her was softer than the one on the tarmac, but no less calculated. You look tired, he said, sitting across from her without asking. So do you, Maya replied. For someone who was supposed to be dead. The smile widened. Death is a matter of paperwork. It can be corrected. They ordered drinks. Small talk followed, absurd in its normalcy. For a moment, it almost felt like before, when Ethan had been simply a man she loved, not a shadow with teeth. Almost. You sent the message, Maya said finally. Why Ethan leaned back? Because I needed you to understand something. None of this is accidental. Then explain it, she said. Start with my father. His eyes flickered, just briefly. Your father kept records. Important ones. Names, payments, favors that were never meant to see daylight. When he tried to leave, your disappearance would have been convenient. Maya's chest tightened. I never disappeared. No, Ethan agreed, because someone intervened. She didn't have to ask who. Dante's family benefited from that intervention. Ethan continued. And now, years later, the debt is coming due. Maya stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Her hands trembled, but her voice held. You're lying. Ethan's smile faded, replaced by something colder. Ask him where the ledgers are. Maya, ask him why your name appears in a place it shouldn't. The words hit harder than she expected. She turned away before he could see the effect they had on her, walking out into the street without waiting for him to follow. The car was already there. Dante said nothing as she slid inside, his expression unreadable. Only when the doors closed did he speak. He told you about the records. He said, yes. And Maya looked at him, searching for something she could trust. He said, my name is in them. Dante did not deny it. The silence that followed was heavier than any confession. The city rushed past outside, oblivious to the fracture forming inside the car. Maya leaned back, her mind racing. Ethan's return was not a coincidence. Neither was Dante's restraint. Somewhere between the two of them lay a truth that threatened to reshape everything she thought she knew about herself. And for the first time since Gate 15, Maya realized something with terrifying clarity. She was no longer running from danger. She was moving toward it. The car moved through the city as if nothing inside it were breaking apart. Traffic lights shifted from red to green. Pedestrians crossed without glancing twice, and New York continued its relentless forward motion. Inside the vehicle, the silence between Maya and Dante grew dense, layered with everything neither of them was ready to say. Maya stared out the window, watching reflections fracture across the glass. Her name, in a ledger, not metaphorical, not symbolic. Written, recorded, preserved in ink meant to outlive the people it condemned. The idea made her feel suddenly smaller, as if her life had been folded into a narrative that began long before she was old enough to speak. "Say something," she murmured at last. Dante did not slow the car. "If I speak without care," he said, "I'll say the wrong thing. Try anyway." He exhaled. Controlled but strained. "Your father was careful." He began, "Careful men survive longer in my world. They don't survive forever." Maya closed her eyes briefly. Was he a criminal? Dante considered the question. He was a record keeper. He believed distance from violence meant innocence. He was wrong. The car turned into an underground entrance, disappearing from the street with practiced ease. They parked in a secure garage Maya hadn't seen before, one far removed from the polished quiet of the apartment she'd been staying in. The air smelled of concrete and oil, older, less curated. Dante stepped out first, offering his hand without ceremony. She took it, surprised by how grounding the contact felt. They moved through a narrow corridor and into a private office that felt more personal than strategic. Bookshelves lined the walls, not for show but for use. A single desk stood near the window, its surface clear except for a closed leather folder resting precisely at the center. Maya's gaze fixed on it immediately. "That's not it," Dante said, following her line of sight. "But it's related." He took a seat across from her, folding his hands together. For the first time since she met him, he looked tired. Not weak, never that, but worn in a way that suggested too many nights spent choosing between bad options. "Your father kept ledgers for multiple families," Dante continued. "Mine was one of them. So were others. He was valuable because he was invisible. He never attended meetings, never made threats, never pulled a trigger. But he wrote everything down," Maya said. "Yes, and when he tried to leave, Dante's jaw tightened. When he tried to disappear, people noticed." Maya felt the truth settle into her chest like a slow ache. "Ethan said my disappearance would have been convenient." Dante did not interrupt. "So why didn't it happen?" she pressed. "Why am I still here?" a beat. Then another. "Finally." Dante stood and moved to the desk, opening the leather folder. Inside were photocopies of old documents, yellowed at the edges, filled with handwriting that looked careful, deliberate, familiar, in a way Maya couldn't immediately place. "Because someone intervened," Dante said quietly. "And because your father made one last entry." He turned the folder toward her. Maya's breath caught. She recognized the handwriting instantly. She had seen it on birthday cards, on notes taped to the refrigerator when she was younger. Her father's meticulous script, unmistakable even after all these years. Her name was there, not as a target, not as a debt, as collateral. Maya's fingers curled against the edge of the desk. "How old was I? 12, Dante said. The room seemed to tilt. 12. Old enough to remember. Old enough to understand fear without knowing its source. She thought of the months after her father's death, the sudden relocations, the warnings not to talk about certain things, the way her mother's smile had thinned into something brittle and protective. "He traded my safety," she whispered. "He secured it," Dante corrected gently. "At a cost." Maya swallowed hard. And that cost was his life. Yes. The truth was sharp, but it didn't surprise her the way she expected it to. Instead, it filled in spaces she hadn't known were empty, explained the shape of unease that had followed her through adulthood like a second shadow. "Ethan knows this," she said. "He knows enough to be dangerous." Dante replied. "He knows how to weaponize truth without carrying its weight." Maya looked up. "And you?" Dante met her gaze steadily. "I carry it?" The honesty in his voice unsettled her more than any denial could have. She realized then that Dante had never tried to distance himself from what he was. He had only drawn lines and lived within them, no matter how narrow they became. "What happens if this comes out?" she asked. "Families fall," Dante said. "Alliances fracture. People die who think they're untouchable." "And me," Dante hesitated. "You become visible." The word echoed. Visible. Seen not as a woman abandoned at an airport, not as someone's former lover, but as a name written into the architecture of power, a liability, a symbol, a key. Maya leaned back in her chair, breathing carefully. Ethan wants me to choose, she said. You or him? Dante shook his head. He wants you to validate his version of the story, to stand beside him when he pulls the thread. And you, I want you alive. The simplicity of the statement struck her harder than any declaration of loyalty. Maya stood, moving toward the window, looking out at the city that had already claimed so much without asking. I won't be his weapon, she said finally. And I won't be yours. Dante nodded once. Good. She turned back to him. But I won't stay ignorant either. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his mouth. That, he said, was never an option. As Maya left the office, the weight of her father's handwriting lingered with her, no longer a secret, but not yet a sentence. Somewhere in the city, Ethan was waiting, certain he was closer to winning than ever. He was wrong about one thing. Maya Ellis was done being collateral. Night pressed itself against the city with deliberate weight, turning windows into mirrors and streets into corridors of reflected light. Maya stood by the glass in Dante's apartment, watching New York rearrange itself below as if nothing had shifted. Inside her, everything had. The knowledge of her father's handwriting, his careful loops, the steadiness of his lines had carved a new architecture into her thoughts. She was no longer guessing. She was remembering. Dante watched her from a distance, giving her space without withdrawing it. He had learned the difference. She realized, or perhaps he had always known it. The quiet between them was not empty. It was charged, like a held note that could shatter glass if struck too hard. Her phone buzzed, not unknown this time. A number she recognized and had spent years training herself not to dial. I don't like sending messages. Ethan wrote, they flatten nuance. Let me make this simple. Another vibration followed before she could respond. Walk outside. Don't bring him. Maya didn't move. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Dante had already noticed the shift in her posture, the minute tightening of her shoulders that meant the world had intruded again. He's asking for you, Dante said. Yes. Alone. Yes. Dante's expression remained composed, but something colder slid into place beneath it. No. The refusal was firm, not dismissive. It carried the weight of a boundary that had been tested too many times to bend now. Maya turned to face him, the city's lights framing her profile. He's already inside this, she said. Everywhere. If I don't hear him out, he'll escalate. And if you do, Dante replied, he'll believe it worked. Maya considered that. It already has. Silence. Then Dante nodded once, the motion precise. 10 minutes. Public ground. Rocco will be close enough to hear your breathing change. Maya didn't thank him. She didn't need to. She understood that this wasn't permission. It was risk management. And that, strangely, made it feel more honest. The cafe Ethan chose was small, warm, and crowded exactly as she'd expected. Too many witnesses, too much noise for threats. He was already there when she arrived, seated near the back, coat draped casually over the chair beside him. He stood when he saw her, his smile restrained, almost respectful. You came? He said. I didn't promise I would, Maya replied. Sitting anyway. No, Ethan agreed. You never promise anything you can't control. They ordered. The server moved away. For a moment, they existed in the fragile bubble of normalcy the room provided, cups clinking, low conversation, the smell of coffee grounding the air. I won't circle this, Ethan said. Time is expensive. Then speak, Maya said. He leaned forward slightly. Your father made enemies, powerful ones. I've spent years cleaning up the damage he left behind. I'm very good at that kind of work. Maya didn't react. She had learned, in the last few days, the power of stillness. There's a ledger, Ethan continued. You've seen part of it, enough to know what it represents. If it surfaces fully, it won't just implicate the families involved. It will implicate anyone connected to them. My family? Maya said. Yes, Ethan replied. Your sister, especially, she's visible, predictable, the kind of person people notice. The words slid across the table like a blade. Maya felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice even. You're threatening her. I'm protecting her, Ethan said calmly, from consequences she didn't earn. And the price, Maya asked. Ethan smiled faintly. Distance. Step away from Dante. Let me finish what I started. When the dust settles, you and your sister walk away clean. Maya stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time, not as the man she had loved, but as the architect he had become. You're asking me to trust you, she said. I'm asking you to recognize reality, Ethan corrected. Dante's world consumes people. It always has. He'll tell you he can shield you. He'll mean it. But he can't rewrite gravity. And you can? Maya asked. Ethan's gaze sharpened. I can end this. She leaned back, considering the offer as if it were a puzzle rather than a threat, by becoming what she asked quietly. The man holding the book. Ethan's silence answered her. Maya stood. You were right about one thing. She said, my father made enemies, but he also made a choice. He chose to keep me alive. Ethan's expression hardened. And I'm offering you the same. No, Maya said. You're offering me silence. She turned and walked away before he could respond. Outside, the air felt sharper, colder, as if the city itself had been listening. The car appeared without spectacle. Rocco opened the door. Dante was inside, waiting. He didn't ask what Ethan had said. He didn't need to. Maya slid into the seat, her hands trembling now that the room of witnesses was gone. He threatened my sister, she said. Dante's jaw tightened. He crossed a line. He offered protection, Maya added, in exchange for me stepping away from you. Dante didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was steady. And what did you say I said no? The words seemed to expand in the space between them, heavy and irrevocable. Dante studied her, not with relief, not with triumph, but with something that looked dangerously like respect. This won't end quietly, he said. I know, Maya replied, but it won't end with me disappearing either. The car pulled back into traffic, the city swallowing them whole once more. Somewhere behind them, Ethan watched a plan shift off course. Somewhere ahead, consequences were already arranging themselves. Maya closed her eyes, the echo of her father's handwriting steadying her breath. She had chosen not safety, but clarity, not escape, but agency. And the night, thick with promise and threat alike, seemed to lean closer, eager to see what that choice would cost. The warehouse by the river had been abandoned long before the city admitted it. Its sign was faded beyond recognition, its windows blinded with dust and salt, its doors rusted just enough to look forgotten. It was the kind of place people stopped seeing after a while, a blind spot carved into the map by habit and neglect. Dante chose it precisely for that reason. Maya felt the air change the moment they stepped inside. It was colder, heavier, carrying the metallic scent of water and old steel. Crates lined the walls in uneven rows, some marked in languages she didn't understand, others blank, anonymous, as if they had been waiting to be filled with anything that needed hiding. A single light swung from a beam above, casting shadows that refused to stay still. We won't stay long, Dante said. Then we move. Maya nodded, pulling the coat tighter around her shoulders. She had stopped asking how he knew where to go. Knowledge, in Dante's world, arrived without explanation and departed the same way. Trusting that fact felt less dangerous than fighting it. They were alone, or so it appeared. Rocco and the others had split off, taking positions outside the perimeter. Dante had insisted on keeping the inside quiet, contained. He said it was easier to hear truth when it wasn't competing with too many footsteps. Maya moved slowly between the crates, her senses sharpened by a tension she could not name. The ledger, if it existed here, would not announce itself. It would be hidden inside something ordinary, something meant to be overlooked. She thought of her father's handwriting again, careful, disciplined, deliberate. He would have chosen a place like this, somewhere forgotten enough to survive. Why here, she asked. Dante didn't look away from the shadows ahead. Because my father used it when he wanted things to disappear without witnesses. The admission landed quietly but heavily. Maya absorbed it without comment, aware that Dante rarely spoke of his father without necessity. This place carried history, and history. She was learning, had teeth. They found the false wall behind a stack of crates. The seam invisible unless you knew exactly where to press. Dante slid the panel aside, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside sat a single metal case, its surface worn smooth by time and handling. Maya's breath caught. Is that... Yes, Dante said. He reached for it. The sound came first, a soft click, almost polite, then a voice, smooth and familiar, echoed through the cavernous space. Careful, Dante. That case doesn't belong to you anymore. Maya spun around. Ethan stepped out of the shadows as if they had parted for him, coat dark, expression composed, gun raised but not aimed. He looked exactly as he had in the cafe controlled, confident, utterly convinced of his position. Two men flanked him, their presence silent but absolute. You led us here, Dante said, his voice dangerously calm. Ethan smiled. You chose here. I merely anticipated it. Maya felt the space between them shrink, tension tightening like a wire drawn too far. You said neutral ground, she said, her voice steady despite the rush of fear. You said no more games. This isn't a game, Ethan replied, turning his gaze to her. It's a correction. Dante shifted slightly, placing himself between Maya and Ethan without making a show of it. You don't walk into my territory and talk about corrections. Your territory? Ethan chuckled. You still believe that? He gestured toward the case. That ledger, your father's sins, your inheritance of power has been shaping your life without your consent. I'm simply offering you the courtesy of understanding it. Dante's jaw tightened. Step away from her. Ethan's smile faded. You don't get to give orders tonight. The truth came then, sharp and unfiltered. Ethan spoke quickly, efficiently, as if he had been rehearsing this moment for years. Dante's father had not been betrayed by outsiders. He had engineered the betrayals himself, trading allies for leverage, sacrificing stability for dominance. Maya's father had seen too much, written too clearly, and tried to disappear with the truth intact. And when he did, Ethan continued, Your father decided an example was necessary. Maya felt the words strike something deep and fragile inside her. She looked at Dante, searching his face for denial. He didn't offer it. If that ledger gets out, Ethan said, your empire collapses. If it stays with me, I decide who survives the fallout. Dante's hand twitched. It was a small movement, almost imperceptible, but Maya saw it. She felt the shift in the air, the moment when restraint began to fracture under the weight of too many losses. She stepped forward without thinking, her fingers closing around Dante's wrist. No, she said. The word cut through the tension like glass. Dante froze, his breath sharp and uneven. Ethan watched the exchange with open interest. She's right, Ethan said softly. You're angry, and anger makes kings careless. Maya met Dante's gaze, her grip firm. If you pull that trigger, she said quietly, everything he said becomes true. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. Then Dante exhaled, the sound rough but controlled. He lowered his hand. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Impressive, he said. You've learned quickly. Enough, Maya replied. This ends when you leave. Ethan considered her, truly considering her now. It ends when I decide it does. He stepped back, signaling his men to follow. Think carefully. Maya, this ledger isn't a shield. It's a blade, and someone will wield it. He disappeared into the shadows as smoothly as he had emerged, leaving behind the echo of his certainty and the hum of unresolved threat. Maya's knees threatened to give out. Dante caught her without comment, steadying her until the world felt solid again. I should have known, he said quietly. I brought you into a trap. You brought me into the truth, Maya replied. Dante looked at the case, then back at her. That was a mistake. No, she said, that was your first honest one. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, the city reminding them that time was still moving, consequences still forming. Inside the warehouse, amid rust and shadows, something irrevocable had shifted. Dante Moretti had made a choice driven not by strategy, but by emotion, and in his world, that was the most dangerous mistake of all. They did not speak on the drive back. Words felt dangerous now, as if naming what had happened in the warehouse would give it sharper edges. New York slid past the windows in fractured reflections, streetlights smeared into gold, faces dissolving before they could be remembered. Maya sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, replaying the moment Dante's control had slipped and the world had nearly tipped into blood. She had stopped a war with one word. That realization settled slowly, uneasily, back at the apartment. The silence was heavier than before. Rocco moved through the space with quiet efficiency, checking windows, murmuring into his phone, then disappearing again. Dante poured a drink he did not touch. The case, the ledger that had almost been theirs, was not with them. Ethan had taken it, and in doing so, had taken something else as well, certainty. He wanted me to kill him, Dante said at last. Maya looked up. He wanted you to become him. Dante's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. Yes. She crossed the room and stood beside him, close enough to feel the tension radiating off his frame. You didn't. Because you stopped me? No, Maya said quietly. Because you listened. The distinction mattered. They both knew it. Later that night, sleep came in fragments. Maya dreamed of ink bleeding through paper, of her father's handwriting dissolving into names she did not recognize. of Ethan's voice echoing from somewhere just out of reach. When she woke, the city was still dark, and Dante was already gone. He returned just after dawn, his expression unreadable, his movements precise. Ethan has begun to leak pieces of the ledger, he said. Not the whole thing, just enough to cause instability. Maya sat up fully. Where everywhere? Dante replied. Anonymously, strategically. The truth, she realized, was no longer a secret waiting to be revealed. It was a weapon being tested, sharpened in public. Families would start turning on each other, alliances fracturing under suspicion. The city would bleed quietly, internally. And you, she asked. What do you do? Dante hesitated. I contain it. Maya studied him. You can't. He met her gaze, something raw flickering beneath his composure. I can try. That was when she understood what Ethan had seen all along. The truth did not belong to either of them. It was too large, too volatile. Anyone who tried to control it would be consumed by it. We need to change the equation, Maya said. Dante frowned. Meaning, she replied. We stop treating the ledger like a crown and start treating it like what it is, a record of crimes that shouldn't be buried or monopolized. Dante was silent. The idea cut against everything he had been raised to believe. Exposure meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant death. You're asking me to burn my own house down, he said. I'm asking you to decide who gets trapped inside it. Maya replied. They argued then, quietly but intensely. Not about strategy, but about responsibility. Dante spoke of collateral damage, of innocent people crushed when power structures collapsed. Maya spoke of slow violence, of what happened when truth was hoarded by men who believed themselves necessary. In the end, it wasn't logic that tipped the balance. It was memory. My father thought writing things down would keep him clean, Maya said softly. It didn't. Silence didn't save him either. But if his words are going to destroy something, let it be the lie that made them necessary. Dante looked at her for a long time. When he finally nodded, it felt less like agreement and more like surrender. We release part of it, he said. Enough to expose patterns, not names, not yet. Maya agreed. The first release went live that afternoon. Financial trails, shell companies, transactions stripped of identities, but unmistakable in their implications. The city reacted instantly. Markets trembled. Old rivals resurfaced. Men who had never feared consequence began to watch their reflections more closely. Ethan responded within hours. His message was brief. You're playing with fire, Maya typed back before Dante could stop her. So are you. The reply came slower this time. You think this ends with balance. It doesn't. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, the city felt different. Taut. Alert. Like an animal sensing a storm. Maya stood at the window again, watching police lights flicker in the distance. Watching a system begin to turn on itself. Dante joined her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. The contact was unintentional, but neither moved away. There was something unspoken between them now, not romance in its softest sense, but recognition. They had seen each other at their most dangerous and chosen restraint. In Dante's world. That was intimacy. He won't stop, Dante said quietly. No, Maya replied. But neither will we, as if summoned by the certainty in her voice. The lights flickered once, then again, before stabilizing. Somewhere far below, sirens rose and fell, a reminder that the city was adjusting, recalibrating around a new truth. Maya closed her eyes, breathing in the night air filtered through glass and steel. She no longer felt like collateral. She felt like a participant. The truth had chosen no side. And for the first time since Gate 15, Maya Ellis understood that choosing no side at all might be the most dangerous position there was. The city did not sleep that night. It shifted instead restless, alert, turning information into instinct. News traveled faster than truth ever had, and suspicion moved faster than fear. By morning, names were being whispered in rooms that had once been sealed tight, and alliances built over decades began to show hairline fractures no one could ignore. Maya felt it before she saw it. The air inside the apartment seemed thinner, as if every breath carried consequence. Dante was already awake when she joined him in the kitchen, his phone resting face down on the counter, unread messages accumulating without sound. It's spreading, she said. Yes, he replied, faster than expected. That was the danger of partial truth. It didn't arrive gently. It arrived like pressure behind glass, invisible until something cracked. Dante had released enough to destabilize the old order, but not enough to control the fallout. Maya had known this would happen. Knowing did not make it easier to witness. Rocco arrived with news just after sunrise. A shipment rerouted. A long-standing ally suddenly unreachable. A meeting canceled without explanation. Each detail on its own was manageable. Together, they formed a pattern that felt ominously familiar. "They're testing you," Maya said when Rocco left. Dante nodded. "They're testing whether I'll close ranks or cut losses." "And which will you do?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if weighing not strategy but consequence. "That depends on how visible you're willing to be." The words settled heavily between them. Visibility had become its own currency, dangerous and powerful all at once. Maya understood that staying beside Dante now meant more than proximity. It meant being seen as part of the equation. "Ethan will push back," she said. "He won't let this remain abstract." As if summoned by her certainty, her phone buzzed. This time, there was no message, only a missed call from her sister. Maya's heart dropped. She dialed back immediately. The ring barely completed before the call connected. "I'm fine," her sister said quickly. Too quickly. Someone came by the office asking questions." "About Dad?" Maya closed her eyes. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that pretend to be polite," her sister replied. "They said his name came up in an audit." Maya's hand tightened around the phone. "Did you tell them anything?" "No," her sister said. "But they'll come back." When the call ended, the silence that followed felt fragile, easily shattered. Dante watched her closely, his expression darkening. "He's escalating," he said. "Yes," Maya replied. "Through me." Dante turned away, pacing once, twice, then stopping abruptly. "You should leave." The words landed harder than any threat Ethan had made. Maya stared at him. "You don't mean that." "I do," Dante said quietly. "At least temporarily. Somewhere unreachable. Somewhere he can't use you as leverage." And my sister Maya asked, "Does she disappear too?" Dante hesitated. "I can protect her." "You already are," Maya said. "And it's not enough." She stepped closer, close enough that he had no choice but to meet her gaze. "If I leave now, he wins. He proves I'm something you hide." Dante's jaw tightened. "If you stay, he hurts you to hurt me." "Then let him see that doesn't work," Maya said. For a long moment, Dante said nothing. The weight of leadership pressed visibly against him now, stripped of distance and abstraction. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and controlled. "If you stay," he said, "there are no half measures. You will be visible, targeted, watched." "I already am," Maya replied. The decision settled between them without ceremony, not dramatic, not romantic, just final. The afternoon brought confirmation of what they already knew. A financial institution froze accounts linked to Dante's network. A charity gala he had been scheduled to attend was suddenly postponed indefinitely. Each move was legal, clean, and devastatingly effective. Ethan sent his next message at dusk. "You could still walk away." Maya read it without reacting, then handed the phone to Dante. "He's offering you an exit," Dante said. "He's offering you obedience," Maya corrected. Dante looked at her with something unreadable in his eyes. "You understand the cost of refusing him?" "Yes," she said. "And I understand the cost of accepting." That night, they stood together on the balcony. The city spread out beneath them like a living map. Lights pulsed, sirens whispered in the distance. Somewhere out there, Ethan was recalculating, adjusting to resistance he hadn't fully anticipated. "I won't ask you to stay," Dante said quietly. "I won't frame this as loyalty or courage." Maya rested her hands on the railing, steady and sure. "Good," she said, "because this isn't about you saving me." She turned to face him. "This is about me choosing where I stand." Dante inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than agreement. "Then stand here," he said, "and understand what it means." The city answered for him. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the skyline, distant but unmistakable. The storm had not yet arrived, but its presence was felt all the same. Maya closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the charged air. Staying would cost her peace. Leaving would cost her truth. She had chosen truth, and in a city built on power and silence, that choice was already rewriting the rules. The storm arrived without warning, not with rain at first, but with silence. New York held its breath, the way it did before something irreversible happened. Maya sensed it the moment she woke, the air inside the apartment unnaturally still, as if the city itself were listening. Dante was already dressed, black, precise, unadorned. There was a tension in his movements she had not seen before, not panic, not fear, but readiness sharpened to a blade. "It's moving tonight," he said. She didn't ask what it was. She had learned that in Dante's world. Questions were often luxuries. Instead, she poured coffee she wouldn't drink and leaned against the counter, grounding herself in the ordinary. "Ethan?" she asked. Dante nodded once. "He's forcing convergence. All the loose threads at once." Maya closed her eyes briefly. "He wants an ending. He wants control," Dante corrected. "Endings are just leverage." By midday, the city reflected the pressure building beneath it. Streets were blocked without explanation. Meetings dissolved before they could begin. A sense of anticipation crept through spaces that were usually indifferent. The truth they had released had done what it was always meant to do. It had destabilized balance. Now someone would try to replace it. Rocco returned in the early afternoon, his expression grave. "We have confirmation. Ethan has the remaining ledger pages. He's scheduled a private meeting tonight." Where Maya asked, Rocco glanced at Dante before answering. "The old freight terminal by the river. The one that never reopened." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "He wants witnesses. He wants closure," Dante said quietly. They prepared without spectacle. No speeches, no reassurances, just logistics, movement, and the kind of calm that only came from understanding exactly how dangerous something was. As they moved through the apartment, Maya noticed small details she hadn't before: the way Dante checked exits without looking, the way Rocco positioned himself instinctively between her and any open space. Before they left, Dante stopped her near the door. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "If this goes wrong," he said, "you leave, immediately." No hesitation. Maya met his gaze, unwavering. "And you?" Dante's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. "I'll make sure you have time." The freight terminal loomed against the darkening sky, its massive silhouette cutting into the horizon. The river beside it moved slowly, deceptively calm. Inside, the space was cavernous, echoing with the sound of footsteps and distant water. Ethan waited at the center, illuminated by harsh overhead lights. He looked almost serene, as if this were a culmination rather than a gamble. The ledger sat on a table beside him, its presence undeniable even from a distance. "You came," Ethan said. "Both of you. You asked for an audience," Dante replied. "Not a spectacle." Ethan smiled. "There's no difference anymore." Maya stepped forward before Dante could stop her. "This ends tonight." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "It does." He spoke then, calmly and publicly, laying out the final pieces of his plan. The remaining ledger pages would be released at dawn: names, connections, consequences. The old order would collapse entirely, and from its ruins, something new would rise, something he would shape. "You can't control what comes after," Maya said. Ethan's eyes gleamed. "Someone will..." Dante moved then, not toward Ethan, but toward the ledger. The tension snapped. Men raised weapons. The air thickened with the promise of violence. Maya acted on instinct. She stepped between them. "Stop," she said. Both men froze. "This truth doesn't belong to either of you," she continued, her voice steady despite the chaos pulsing beneath it. "You don't get to decide who burns to warm your hands." Ethan studied her, something almost like regret flickering across his face. "You've changed." "Yes," Maya said, "and so have the rules." She reached into her coat and placed a small device on the table beside the ledger. A flash drive. Ethan's smile faltered. "I copied everything," Maya said. "Not for release, for protection. If anything happens to either of us, it goes public automatically." The silence that followed was absolute. Dante looked at her, realization dawning. "You planned this?" "I planned for survival," Maya replied. Ethan laughed softly. "You always were more dangerous than you looked." The standoff held, fragile and electric. Finally, Ethan stepped back, signaling his men to lower their weapons. "This isn't over," he said. "No," Maya agreed, "but it's no longer yours." As they left the terminal, rain began to fall at last, washing dust and tension from the air. Maya exhaled, her body trembling now that the moment had passed. They didn't speak on the drive back. They didn't need to. The fall had been averted, but what came next would decide everything. The city woke the next morning as if nothing had happened. Traffic moved, markets opened, coffee shops filled with people arguing softly about ordinary things. New York had always been skilled at absorbing catastrophe without pausing to mourn it. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted, and those who lived by power felt it immediately. The ledger never went public. Not in the way Ethan had planned. Not as a weapon. Not as an explosion meant to erase and replace. Instead, fragments of it carefully chosen, legally undeniable, found their way into the hands of institutions that could not be silenced or bought. Investigations began quietly. Audits followed. Old alliances dissolved not with violence, but with paperwork and subpoenas. The collapse was slower, cleaner, and far more permanent. Ethan disappeared again. This time, no grave was left behind. Maya stood at the window of Dante's apartment, watching the city settle into its new shape. The storm from the night before had scrubbed the air clean, leaving behind a clarity that felt unfamiliar. For the first time since Gate 15, she did not feel like she was bracing for impact. Dante joined her without a word. He looked different now, not weaker, not less dangerous, but unburdened in a way she had not known was possible for him. Power no longer pressed so heavily against his spine. It rested, recalibrated. "It's done," he said quietly. Maya nodded. "It's changed." They stood in silence for a moment, sharing the stillness rather than filling it. The past days had stripped them down to essentials truth. Choice. Consequence. What remained between them was not obligation or fear, but something steadier. Later that afternoon, Maya visited her sister. There were tears, and relief, and long-held questions finally asked aloud. The shadow over their family had not vanished, but it no longer dictated their steps. For the first time in years, Maya felt the future stretch forward without pre-written margins. When she returned, Dante was waiting. "I've stepped back," he said. "From the parts that needed burning." Maya studied him. "And the rest?" "The rest," Dante replied, "will be rebuilt. Differently." She understood what he was offering, not absolution, not a fairy tale, but intention. A world where power was measured by restraint rather than reach. "You don't owe me that," she said. "I know," Dante answered. "That's why I'm choosing it." Evening arrived softly. The city lights flickered on one by one, less menacing now, more familiar. They shared dinner without urgency, conversation drifting to smaller things, books, travel, moments that existed outside strategy and survival. Later, standing on the balcony, Maya felt something settle inside her. Not certainty, not forever, but peace with uncertainty. "I won't stay because I'm afraid," she said. Dante met her gaze. "I wouldn't accept that. I'll stay," Maya continued, "because this is where my voice matters." Dante inclined his head, a gesture of respect rather than possession. "Then stay," he said. "As yourself." The city breathed below them, vast and indifferent and alive. Somewhere far away, consequences continued unfolding. Somewhere else, new stories were beginning without their knowledge. Maya leaned into the quiet, into the understanding that love did not have to be loud or reckless to be real. That sometimes, the happiest ending was not an escape, but a choice to stand where the fire had been and build something that could endure. And in New York, a city that never promised mercy, two people learned how to offer it anyway.